Hello, this is Peter Morrissey from the Stockbury Dark. Working closely with my co-host Klaus Almian from Stockholm, Sweden, we plan on bringing you truly dark stories from one side of the world to the other. We have been busy interviewing many of our friends from our world and subculture, stories dealing mainly with the occult, paranormal, and other dark topics. We really hope you enjoy these episodes as much as we do. What started as a spark from the mind of Klaus has now certainly ignited a huge firestorm of stories that will surely keep you up at night. The Stockbury Dark can be found on iTunes Podcasts, on our Facebook page, the official Stockbury Dark, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as our website, thestockburydark.com. We can be reached at thestockburydark@gmail.com. Please help us spread the word, and thank you for listening. This episode of the Stockbury Dark is brought to you by the Black Market Kitchen. The Black Market Kitchen is a meal service providing you with delicious, healthy, and clean meals. Do you live a busy life and don't have the time to cook, or do you just prefer the convenience of having your meals prepared? With a range of options to suit many tastes and dietary preferences, Black Market Kitchen caters to a wide variety of folks. Perhaps you want to lose weight, eat less processed and packaged foods, and or just improve your overall health. At Black Market Kitchen, they have developed an understanding of the types of foods athletes and active individuals need to fuel their daily activities. They offer vegetarian, paleo, and ketogenic compliant options in addition to their regular clean meals. The gourmet menu, consisting of perfectly sized portions, is updated weekly, providing customers with something new and delicious each week. It is their mission to make achieving your nutrition goals easier. No matter what your sport or diet, Black Market Kitchen wants to help you become the best version of yourself. Streamline your life and order up your meals. Black Market Kitchen offers statewide door-to-door delivery in Connecticut for a $25 fee. If you're local to the greater Waterbury area, stop in and try a fresh juice, smoothie, protein shake, or bulletproof coffee, and grab a few meals from the cooler. They have tons of healthy snacks to choose from, including their house-made keto bars, as well as raw and vegan options as well. Visit their website at theblackmarketkitchen.com. Sign up for the mailing list and have the weekly menu delivered to your inbox. Follow them on Facebook and Instagram at the Black Market Kitchen. Hello and welcome to the Stockbury Dark. My name is Peter Morrissey.
I'm Klaus out in Stockholm, Sweden.
And today we have a special guest, Ian Wise, who is from Chicago, in the band Fuerza, Bruta. Is that proper pronunciation?
It's close enough. I'll let it ride.
And label owner of Foreign Legion Records.
Yep. So how you doing, Ian? Good to have you here with us today.
Oh, thank you. I'm doing all right. I'm a little under the weather, but I'm feeling okay.
It's been a long winter. I'm sure Chicago's been the same.
I can't wait for the weather to break finally.
It's not ended here in Connecticut. We've had like 3 nor'easters in the last 2 weeks, and they're still calling for some more snow this week, which is pretty amazing since March is already half over, you know?
Right. The snow's not too bad. It's still just in the 30s.
Usually here in Sweden, like March can be a proper spring month, and it's been all out winter so far. And we just had like 3 days of sun, and now in the afternoon it started snowing again.
Yeah, it's unrelentless everywhere in the Northeast and Midwest and out there. which is fine by me because I'm not a fan of the sun.
I was in Sweden in like April a couple of years ago, and I liked the weather. It was a little bit chillier than I thought it would be, but it was comfortable.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, April at like end of March, and then April. That's when spring usually hits, but it should be here by now, and I'm
Right.
This is a tough thing to say, but right now, right here, this second, I'm done with the winter for 2018. I really am.
Mm-hmm. All right, so Ian, we spoke briefly before. You kind of know the gist of the show. To all the people that hopefully will be listening to us soon, we'll give you a basic rundown. The Stockbury Dark is, we've been interviewing people from our, not even say our music scene, but just a lot of people from bands. Hopefully, some artists we'll be speaking to, and we're not really focusing on their actual art or their music. We're kind of getting these interviews in the vein of speaking about dark topics, such as paranormal, the occult, anything that, I don't know, what would you say, cause like just things on the darker side of life, I guess.
Absolutely, and would you? Now that you did mention the music, we do have an idea that for people like us, the dark always like walked hand in hand with the subcultures that we've been involved with,
Mm-hmm.
be it punk or oi or hardcore or whatever. The dark was always there, and now we're digging further into it with stories and events
Mm-hmm.
being told by our friends and people within our circles and friends of friends. And that's why we're sitting here with you tonight, Ian, and we're really excited about this. This is our first guest from Chicago, and we're talking with a friend who's in an excellent band and who's putting out excellent music at the moment.
Including Shipwrecked.
Yeah, including Shipwreck, yeah.
So yeah, I've got a couple different stories that I think might interest you guys. If you wanna kind of just jump right into it.
Yeah,
There's not much
fine.
of a backstory for either of them really. So I guess the best place to start would be when I moved back up to Illinois. I was down in Alabama for a couple of years, and I came back up here, and I moved to, it's actually a suburb of Chicago, just a couple blocks outside the city, a town called Blue Island. There's a lot of good music from there. Fierce City, the band, is from Blue Island. And I moved in with this guy, Juan, who's a few years older than me, and he warned me before I got to the house that he said the house has spirits. That's the way he put it. Which, I lived in the South for a bunch of years. People using the phrase, this house has spirits, to me just means it's an old house. It settles, I don't really think like that. So I didn't think that much of it until a couple of days goes by, and I asked him kind of what he meant. Like, I'd heard some noises around the house, and I was like, okay, well, the stairs are creaky, whatever. And he told me this story about his dog's toys started going missing, like every day, and like a new toy would go missing. And he said over the course of like 6 or 7 months, he spent like $100 on like new dog toys, and he couldn't find them anywhere. And then one day he came home from work, and his dog was just standing in front of the washing machine, and he opened up the washing machine, and it was filled to the brim with the dog toys that he'd been buying over the last like 6 months. And I was like, yeah, I was very confused. I was like, that's the story that he used to kind of elaborate on this idea of the house has spirits. And honestly, sorry, Juan, I'm sure he'll probably hear this. What went through my head was, this guy's kind of weird,
Yeah.
But I started to notice some more things about the house. Like, there was the storm door out front, like a glass storm door. And I would hear it open and close. And every once in a while, he'd come home from work and he'd tell me, like, hey, you got to make sure to latch the glass storm door because the wind will blow it open and the glass will break. So I started paying like real close attention to making sure it was locked and everything. And it kept being opened. And one night I was standing on the stairs looking down, and we had this like wood door with a glass window and then the storm door out front of it. And I could see the door that I had just latched open and close like a person was opening and closing it. Which kind of freaked me the fuck out, as I'm sure you can understand. But I'm the kind of person, like, I went and inspected the door and relatched it and everything, and I just kept trying to convince myself that this was something that what I was doing, Mm-hmm. We had some other weird things happen. Like, I remember one time he was gone, and I was kind of drunk, and the garbage can was full in the kitchen, and I came home late, and I threw something in the garbage can, and made a mental note, like, I'm too drunk to take out the garbage. I'll take it out tomorrow morning. Woke up the next morning, and the garbage was out. And I figured he had come home early and taken it out. And I called him, and he had gotten drunk and stayed at his girlfriend's house, and mm-hmm. somebody took the fucking garbage out. And it wasn't until, I was living in that house for maybe 6 or 7 months before I started to really hear shit. Like, we started to have like problems with the power in the house. Like, the power would just go off with, the weather would be fine. No problems with anybody else on the block. You could walk outside and see all the lights on other places, and the power would just go out. And there were times, like, I remember one time being in the shower, the power went out. I didn't think that much of it. It's like pitch black in there, but didn't think that much of it. Like, got out, dried off, and the dog was in my room, like, standing at my doorway growling. I thought the dog was growling at me because I couldn't see her, like, she couldn't see me. Mm-hmm. And I like said something to her and walked up and pet her, and she let me go by in my bedroom, and then she stood at the doorway growling out, like growling at something out in the house. And not too long after that, I was in bed one night. This is probably, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 days after that happened. And I had just this weird fucking feeling. That was like the first time I ever got like anxious being there, And so as, I'm kind of trying to shake it for a couple of days. And then I get woken up in the middle of the night to the downstairs door, like the door that would open and close by itself, like slamming, And I figured my roommate came home late, whatever. And I looked out the window because I could see the driveway, and his car wasn't there. So I thought, there's an intruder in the house. And I didn't know what to do. We didn't have it's not as bad anymore, but it was kind of a rough area at the time. And I was like, shit, I don't have a gun. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I kind of just like, I'm holding my shit together for a few minutes, thinking, like, waiting for someone to come up the stairs. And then I hear somebody downstairs in like the kitchen area, and like walking around, like real heavy footsteps. And then I hear somebody walk up the stairs, like real deliberate. And I didn't know what to do. Like, I kind of like got back in bed. And then the next thing I know, like, important to note that the whole house, except for the downstairs kitchen and my bedroom, was all carpet. So you hear this like thud, like heavy boots on carpet walking around. My room was hardwood floor. And I'm kind of losing it because I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I'm like putting on clothes, like getting ready to like defend myself and run. And there's footsteps in my room. Like, it changes from like the thud of being on carpet to like boots, like hard-soled boots walking on my hardwood floor in my room. And I mean, like, it's right around me, like walking around my bed. And I'm like sitting on the bed. I'm completely wide awake. And it just kind of stops at like the foot of my bed where I had like some notebooks and my clothes were. And and then it just kind of walked off, and then the sound just stopped happening. And that's when I started like paying attention, and I started noticing like sounds, and like we'd not an attic, but like a crawl space, not a crawl space, like between the roof and like the top of the house, like there's like an air, like for
Right.
air to pass through. And like what I thought were raccoons for the last 6 or 7 months, like started noticing like maybe that's a different noise or whatever. And I would notice the dog at times would like, I would hear it and think I was hearing something, and then I would look and I'd watch the dog like watching, like looking up exactly where I heard the sounds coming from, like growling. But I hadn't really brought it up with my roommate. I mean, I'd brought it up with him a couple times, and he I have more of a skeptic personality. So when we would talk about these things, even though I was hearing the stuff and not seeing anything, whenever that got brought up, in my mind, I'm still just like, this is kind of fucking insane. And I'm always looking for another solution. And he was just like, no, it's ghosts. Like, you're just, you're a weird guy. You like attract this. And so I didn't like talking to him about it because I felt like I was encouraging him.
Right.
So I learned to just kind of keep my mouth shut. And he had told me some other stories. He said that at one point when he was a kid, his parents had lived there before. He said that his mom had like seen an apparition in the house. But he didn't really volunteer that much information. I think because he knew that I was, I didn't want to hear it. You know what I mean? So he didn't try to push it on me too much. But there was a night I was about to go to bed. It was kind of late. It was like maybe, I don't know, maybe midnight or whatever. So like not super late. And I remember I had left the downstairs light on in the kitchen. And I just went downstairs to turn it out before I went to bed. And I wasn't thinking about anything, just like kind of tired, wanted to go to bed. And I walked into the kitchen. So you walk down the stairs and you kind of got to do like a U through like a living area. And then I'm in the kitchen, and next to the kitchen is a garage. And the best way I know how to describe it, and it sounds kind of weird, but I get the feeling that you'll like know what I'm talking about. Like, have you ever been at work or something and you walk in on somebody that's like super upset, or like somebody crying or something in like a break room, and you kind of feel like out of place? You know what I mean?
Very awkward.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
What happens
also,
is that you walk into bad energy, basically.
yeah, but it's like a really specific feeling. Like I felt like it was like I was somewhere that I was supposed to be, but I felt like I shouldn't be there at that. Like I felt like I was intruding on someone, not like something malicious necessarily, but like, like I should just leave someone alone, but I'm in the house by myself. And it's about 10 feet from the doorway to the light switch. And it's off to my left, and then off to my right is where the kitchen table is, and that's where I got this like bizarre feeling. It was like from the kitchen table, and it was just really weird, and I didn't know what to make of it. And I just thought like I was tired, and I was just, I don't know, not imagining things, but I just thought it was like my mind playing tricks on me. So I didn't think that much of it, and I walked over and I put my hand up to the light switch. So my left hand's out, and all of a sudden, like, the temperature drops, I mean, like 10 degrees in like an instant.
Fuck.
And I freeze. I'm like, this is fucking weird. And I feel like a hand on my right shoulder and a pressure on my body, and like, I don't want to say like breath on my neck, but it was like a movement of air, like down from like, the 11s, I guess, that's what we called them when I was a kid. Like the two like pieces of cartilage on the back of your neck that stick out, like this like movement of air from that, like all the way down my back. And it like held held on to me. I'm talking with my hands and you can't even see me, but like, yeah, it's like holding on to my shoulder. And like, I fucking freaked out, like turned out the light and like sprinted to the stairs. And I got like, I could still feel like not the pressure on my whole body, but this like, you know, like fingers, like a hand grabbing onto my shoulder till I was like maybe halfway up the stairs, you know? And then it just kind of dissipated. I went to bed. And then I don't think it was the same night. I think it was like the next night I had the same kind of experience of like hearing footsteps around the house and like hearing stuff in my room, like those clicks, you know, from boots. And at that point, the next day, like I was like pretty fucking freaked out after that. And I'm pretty sure it was the next morning. I decided like, dude, I gotta talk to my roommate about this. Like, this is like way too bizarre for me to deal with. And I was going to go talk to him. Like he came home. He worked overnights at the time. That's why he was never home at night. So he came home. It's like maybe 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. And I could hear him and I go downstairs to talk to him. And he's like, hold on a second. So we're just like standing there silently. And the glass door that had been opening and closing opened and closed itself while we were standing there. And he said the reason he told me to stop is because he said he had seen it happen like right before I walked down the stairs. Like he thought that I had come back in or something. And that's when I was like, hey man, we got to have a fucking conversation. And so I told him what happened the night before. And he was like, okay, so this is what you need to know about this house. And he brought me out front and showed me it was a brick house. So we had the garage off to the left, and then the kitchen, which was like directly in front where the door was. And you could see, I never noticed it before. It was like brown brick. Where the living room was, the brick was a slightly different color. It's like a little bit lighter. And he's like, so where this brick used to be was like the extension of the garage. It was originally a 2-car garage with just the living quarters up front. And he said when his parents, like right before his parents bought the building, they converted one of the garages to like another kitchen space and built another bedroom upstairs and all this shit. But he found out a few years after they had bought it that a person had killed themselves in the house. And I want to say the late 60s. I'm not 100% sure. By running their car until they suffocated from the exhaust fumes. And they were parked in the right side of the garage, which was now their car would have been in the kitchen, which is where I felt this like weird presence, you know? So after he told me that, I was kind of freaked out because like, obviously I didn't know that information when that happened the night before. I didn't know about all of these other things, you know, and it seemed weird that I was experiencing these things that were kind of concentrated on this one area. And I left like later that day, and I was with a friend of mine who had stayed over a couple times, and I started to tell him about what had happened the night before, and I was getting to the part where Juan told me about this thing that happened in the garage before he had the house, right? And I'm telling him this story. I'm like, yeah, and it was, you know, so it was in the kitchen, and this guy was like, oh, like near where the bathroom is in the back of the garage. And I totally forgot that there was even a bathroom back there because we didn't really use that part of the garage, but there's a toilet and a little sink. And I said, yeah. So really just like right outside of that room in the kitchen. And he said, yeah, a couple weeks ago when I was sleeping on your guys' couch, like you or Juan were in the upstairs bathroom. So I went down to the downstairs bathroom and I walked out and the kitchen was full of smoke, like it was on fire. And he thought that there was a fire. So we like ran through it and he turned around and all the smoke was gone, but he could smell gasoline and realized like he thought, he just thought it was kind of like a waking dream. But it was just, and then I told him about the guy killing himself in the garage with his car, which all kind of points to the same fucking weird situation, I guess. I don't know. But I ended up leaving that house not too long after that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say I maybe lived there for, I don't know, maybe just a couple more months. I was only there for about a year. And there was a night that I was upstairs and I was like drinking a beer and writing in my notebook, because I do a lot. And that downstairs door kept opening and closing, like loud, like slamming. And I went downstairs, relatched it, like double checked it and everything, kept opening and closing. And then I like yelled at it. Like, I don't even remember what I said. But I yelled something, and the door, it like slammed shut. And then that like movement of air that I talked about before, like I could feel it coming from this like down hallway where the stairs were. So it's like cold, not like freezing, like frigid cold, just this like an air cannon. You know what I mean? Like you hit something and the air pops out of the other end.
Yeah.
And it happened, and I passed out. Like not for a long time. I was out for like maybe 20, 30 seconds. But I mean, like when you get hit too hard, like I felt like, the like black, like fuzziness on the edge of my vision and everything. And I like came to a second later, and I felt somebody sit next to me on the couch. I like the fucking worst experience of my entire life. And like, I just kind of like sat there for a second, and then right behind me there was like just like 2 layers of drywall between like me and those stairs that lead down to that door. And there was like, it sounded like somebody hit the drywall right behind my head. I mean, just like with like the palm of their hand, not like a punch, just like real loud, just like bop, bop. And I got the fuck up and I left. And I like went to the bar, and I was gone within 2 weeks. I couldn't do it anymore. I moved the fuck out of that house, moved into a house with no furniture and no nothing, just because it seemed better than staying there.
Did you ever feel like it was like a malevolent spirit, or like any true fear, like any evil to it, or was it more of just like these noises and these things and kind of just it's like trickery?
I don't know. Like, I never felt like I was in danger.
Right.
I will say that. The dog acting the way that it did, like the time when it like stood in my doorway and was like growling at something. And there was another time, the night that happened, that I left, where it like hit the drywall, the dog started barking and was growling and like walking around the house.
Yeah, that's like super alarming in itself. When you see an animal react, when you feel something could be happening or going on, or you feel almost like some sort of presence, and then to see like a creature like a dog start picking up on that, it's always
right, exactly.
It's alarming.
And but the way that I looked at it also was like, the dog can clearly see that I'm a little bit freaked out. And the dog just kind of, I think that she was going into like protective mode,
Right.
And so, I mean, I get what you're saying, and I don't disagree with you. I guess maybe I didn't want to think about it that way. I was trying to find like other ways to rationalize it.
Yeah. Through your whole story, Ian, it's like, it's really not funny, but there's these similarities to a story I told previous. Klaus will back this up. The first couple episodes, let me be quick with this, is Klaus and we did our own type of stories, to let our listeners kind of like know who we are. And one of my stories was basically the first house I ever bought and fixed up, and I was going through very similar things with the house, noises and seeing things and hearing things, and come to find out at a later date, there was a suicide in the house, which I found out, much later. And as you're telling the story, I swear to God, well, you were just describing everything that I went through, and it was like so almost to a T. Like a lot of these things, all the way up into a feeling of presence, kind of like sit next to you, and you know,
Right.
it was like a
That's crazy.
gradual small things that build up until like almost that end game where you're like, I got to get out of here.
Right, right. And it's almost like,
And
I mean,
there as well, I never felt like anything like super like evil or dark. Like I was, you know, it was like frightening in its own way, but never felt like in peril or in danger or anything like that. You know.
right. Yeah. I never felt like there was like I was in immediate danger. Like there was somebody like trying to hurt me.
Right.
Um, you know, when I did end up finally talking to Juan about it, he has much more of like a spiritual side of things. He actually suggested, he was like, dude, you should probably go see a therapist or something. And I was like, what do you
Yeah.
mean? And he was like, well, you know, you've had problems with depression and anxiety and shit. He goes, you know, I thought he was trying to tell me that like maybe you're crazy. Like I finally crossed the line with him, but he was saying, you know, if it is what he thought it was, he's like, you know, these things feed on this like negative energy, and you're a pretty negative guy, so you might just be they could be thinking of you as like a comrade almost, I guess is what he was trying to get at.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was but I mean, and honestly, I mean, this like I told Klaus when we talked about this a couple days ago. I consider myself a pretty strict atheist. Like if you walked up to me on the street and you're like, "Do you believe in ghosts?" I would tell you no, like unequivocally, without hesitation. But you know, I don't know how to explain. I don't know how to explain those like feelings
Right.
that I had. I don't know how to like explain the actual like physical element of this like, you know, things touching me and
Mm-hmm.
the way that air moved where it shouldn't have been coming from anywhere, or temperatures changing, or the sounds I heard, you know, other than like maybe I had like a schizophrenic episode that lasted a year in only one house, you know.
No, and you described this. You described these serious events very, very well, and what you might not notice yourself, but what's kind of what's very interesting and also problematic, and also in me and Pete's world, dark as fuck, is that it increased. Uh, in my world, it was something or someone uh, wanting a form of interaction,
Mm-hmm.
and it started off with these like small things, but then it just got well. One way to put it is it got worse and worse and worse, and that's one way to put it. But you could also say that it just increased in power till it eventually became like super obvious.
Right, right. Well, and then, you know, I wondered sometimes about like, was I starting to notice more things? Like every time I would admit to myself, like, okay, I heard that. And didn't try to explain it. Like there was I think like the very first day I was in that house, my bedroom door would rattle all the time. I mean, like somebody was like jiggling the doorknob. I forgot to bring that up. But it would only happen when like, you know, my window was open and there was probably like a draft of air or something getting under the door that made the air shake it back and forth. So there were, you know, these little things that there was like, okay, well, that's like a very clear explanation of why this is happening. And then as things go on and you start to notice like, well, I don't have an explanation for that. And you're not like able to rationalize these things. And I think that once you start to interact with either something external that's trying to talk to you, or with your own like psychotic issues that you are exacerbating through this, that starts to become more apparent. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Definitely.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
I don't mean to I don't mean to scare you or anything, but you mentioned the dog before,
Uh-huh.
and since I am of the opinion that dogs are the most amazing and smart creatures alive, and for one thing, the dogs don't lie. If a dog feels if a dog picks up that you're in distress or not feeling well and you're not feeling 100%, what a dog will do then is that they will try to get closer to you. And the one explanation for that is that dogs have lived with us for so long. So if you're not feeling well, a dog will try to keep you warmer. So they will try to give you heat. And I mean that comes from us living with them for 100,000 years. So if someone wasn't feeling well, that was a way of keeping them warm. Otherwise, they would die out of fever or out of cold or anything else. But if a dog's with you, and a dog canalizes hostility towards a person or room or spot or noises, that's because the dog is picking up on something. And it doesn't matter if the spirit or whatever we want to call it, doesn't matter if it was hostile or not, because you were part of the pack, and whatever this was not a part of the pack. And to a dog, that's the only thing that matters. There's those that are in the pack and those are outside of the pack, and that layer to it makes it pretty fucking dark. I must say, yeah.
Well, I got out of there, and I moved into a different house. I didn't have any problems at that house. Well, not related to that anyway. But a couple of years later, I moved into a house in Bridgeport, which, Klaus, I did mention this to you too. Bridgeport's a neighborhood on the southwest side of Chicago. A very rich history of violence and hauntings and whatever. Like, we would have, like, the Chicago ghost tours would pull up, like, right in front of our building, like, when we lived in that apartment, actually. Because there was, like, I don't remember who it was, but in the building next to us, there was, like, an empty lot and then another building, and there was, like, some famous gangster that got killed in it, and they said he was supposed to still haunt that building or whatever. But in that house, I was there for about 2.5 years, and there were some odd things that did happen in that house, and there was at least one person that we knew of that had died in that house. There was a speakeasy in the top floor, during the Prohibition era, and a fire had broken out, and a young girl had died just above us, which I never thought too much of. My neighbors actually said that they could see the little girl walking around, which I never saw. But the reason I thought about this, though, is because you brought up the dog, and how the dog kind of interacted with that situation.
Yes.
So the dog was Juan's dog, but I moved in with my girlfriend who had a cat, and it was a pretty docile cat for the most part. I mean, it would wake you up in the middle of the night because it wanted food or whatever, but it would pretty much, you would never really hear it during the night. It wasn't like a mischievous cat. But when we moved into that house, we started noticing that the cat would, like, run back and forth the length of the apartment at night, and never knocked anything over. When there wasn't anything for it to chase, and I would catch it sometimes. Like, if I would stay up late, it would just be kind of sitting on the couch next to me, and I would notice that I didn't know where it went, and that I would see it in a corner, like, looking like it was playing with a person. And it would run, like, the same way that cats run if you have, like, a laser pointer, or, like, one of those little toys that dangles and you're, like, running with it. And it never did that before. And it would just do it, like, with the air. And we would notice it, like, concentrating on spots, like, that were moving, and we'd be, like, looking for a bug on the wall or something. And that's the only thing that I experienced that was, like, external like that in that house. But when I was, like, thinking about this stuff before, I didn't even think about the cat interacting with that until you just were talking about the dog.
Yeah, I think cats are different. Like there's a wild side to cats that I don't really understand. But I mean, obviously they pick up on stuff like dogs do.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
I think cats are just I don't know. They have just totally different personalities.
Yeah, I mean
They're more.
a cat can disappear for 2 months and just reappear one day and like wherever you've been. Well, I left for a bit and now I'm back.
Right. Yeah. I just felt like leaving for a while. Well, and the other thing about cats is they just have. I don't know. They're more like sovereign than dogs are. I feel. Cats don't travel in packs. Well, not like domesticated packs. They don't build those bonds the same way that dogs do. So I think there's a little bit more intrigue sometimes to the way cats act.
That's true. I'm actually an owner of. I have 3 Siamese cats, and this is where the exceptions are made because these cats are like a pack of dogs. I've never seen anything like it. Everyone that comes to my house and visits are totally blown away by how these cats react. They come right up. They're probably the 3 friendliest cats you've ever meet. And they have so many like canine aspects to them. It's really bizarre. I've never seen anything like it. Not that we're getting into like a pet discussion here, but
Cats versus
I just
dogs
had to bring that up about these cats. Now, earlier class was mentioning to me that you guys spoke about you having bouts of sleep paralysis as well.
Yeah, and that's actually why the other building came up when I moved there. So I like I said before, or actually I don't know if I said this now or when we were just kind of talking off air. I had sleep paralysis for the first time when I want to say I was in like third grade or something. I was like 7 or 8 years old, and it was like a real quick thing. It would happen when I like woke up and I just couldn't move. I assume both of you have either had sleep paralysis or like have talked to other people about it or read about it. And it wasn't something that happened often. Like not even enough to even like concern me. Like, I mean, it happened like maybe once every couple of years. Um, Never brought it up to, I think I mentioned it to my parents a couple times and it was not a big deal. Like I never saw a doctor or whatever. So I never really like investigated it that much. I just thought that maybe I had trouble waking up sometimes. It wasn't until I think I was 19 or 20 years old and I got married when I was a kid. I had a child when I was a teenager. I had like a rough few years there in my like late teens, early 20s. And my sleep paralysis, like it started happening kind of consistently. And that was the first time it was something that I like wanted to look up, but I didn't know what it was called. I didn't even know how to look it up. And I ended up just like randomly reading an article about sleep paralysis and realized that that's what I had. And it said it was exacerbated by stress, which made a whole lot of sense. And it was also exacerbated by like sleep positions. So it was like purely like a scientific thing. I really, what I read about it said that it was totally harmless, not a big deal. And so I kind of just, let it go. Like it was whatever. It still happens sometimes, but once I had a little bit of an explanation for it, I didn't think about it that much. And then it would kind of come and go in bouts. But when I moved into this building, and I didn't even make the connection until after I had moved out, it came back and it came like I hadn't experienced it for, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years maybe. And it started happening at least once a week. And then like at times it would happen every single day. And what would happen is I would fall asleep and I would wake up and the room would be totally empty. Like I would be in the room where I was, but it would just be me on my bed. Like my girlfriend wasn't there. My like dresser wasn't there. And I was like that had never happened before. I would always be like, before when it happened, I would be waking up and I would be very well aware of the fact that I was like where I thought I was, and I was just having some trouble waking up, and I would be able to, like, after maybe 90 seconds to 2 minutes or whatever, like, coax my body into moving, and then I would move and I would wake up and it would be fine. But this is the first time it would ever happen where I would be able to, like, open up my eyes and see, and things weren't, it was like the same but different, they weren't quite what they should be. And then in my, like, doorway, I had a bed, like, I would wake up and look, it would be south. So that would be, like, down, like, towards my feet. There was a window, and then there was a doorway just, like, off to the right. So on the south end of the room to the right. And it would start to happen where I would wake up and see this, and it would last longer, like 5 minutes or so. And then eventually, I guess kind of like what we talked about before, it's like you start to interact with it. You start to notice more. And I would notice people, like the door would be open, and I never slept with my door open ever. I still don't. But my door would be open, and I could see people in the other room. Like, I could only catch this little sliver of it. And it's like shadows, but they were dressed in white. Like, I could tell they were dressed in white, even though it was real dark. And then that got to be, like, more common, and then I started to notice them in the room with me. And then I started having, when it was at its height, this would happen every night, and it would happen for hours. I mean, literally, I'd go to bed at 10 o'clock, and by, a couple hours would go by, and I would wake up, and I would have, it was a girl in white with, like, kind of long, dark hair, and she would be, like, out in front of these other people, these, like, shadows behind her. I could never really, like, see these other people, but I could see this girl. And then these other figures would come around me, like, one on each side, and they would hold my shoulders down. And this girl would sit, like, kind of where my chest was, like, not on me, but just kind of off to the side, like the way you talk to, like, if your kid's sick and you're sitting next to them, talking to them, whatever. And I could hear, like, these people would be holding me down and, like, screaming in my ears. And this girl would, like, lean down to where her face was close to mine, and she would take her right hand. Sorry, I'm, like, trying to figure out she would take her right hand and put it on my neck, like, just below my jawline, and peel back. And I could feel my, like, face opening up. Like, not in, like, a gory way, but like there was, like, a separation between my neck and my head. And there was, like, a chasm there, like an opening. And it's like she was trying to separate parts of me, and I could physically feel, like, something entering my body. And I would wake up, and I would be in my room in the real world, and my girlfriend would be there, and then I would immediately fall back asleep, and they would be back there. And it would happen for, like I said, when it would happen for, like, the entire night until the sun came through and I could finally wake up. I was in that house for about 2.5 years, and then I moved to the building that I bought that I'm in now, and it just stopped. As soon as I moved, it never happened again. And I've been here for almost 3 years. It hasn't happened. But the thing that freaks me out about it the most is when I read about sleep paralysis when I was, like, 19, 20, and I was able to kind of rationalize it and dismiss it, I never read about hallucinations. I never read about, like, the figures or the ghosts or anything. I had no idea that was a part of sleep paralysis. I had no idea that other people experience stuff like that. I watched this fucking dumb movie on Netflix that was like that documentary. I don't remember what it was called.
It was like Shadow People or something like that, I think.
Something. Oh no, it was just called The Nightmare.
or the nightmare.
Yeah.
There's actually a couple of them in the last couple of years. So.
Yeah, if there's another one, I'd love to see it. I was watching it, and my girlfriend was with me, and she's like, "Oh yeah, like that's what you look like when you have the bouts of sleep." It was showing like the guy like move his head back and forth and shit. She was like, "Yeah, that's what you look like when you say that you've had these like things." And I was like, "Yeah. I guess that makes sense." And I wasn't thinking anything of it. And then when it was interviewing people talking about these like visions that they have during sleep paralysis, I remember my girlfriend got up and left. And she was like doing something, and she thought that it was like kind of cheesy, and I was like quietly losing my shit because what people were describing, like a lot of it was exactly, I mean, like to a T, exactly what I had seen.
Right.
Except like I had no idea that this was like a part of something that had happened. And I remember like the next day I was at a bar with a friend of mine, and I was explaining to her what was going on. And the bartender, who was a guy I knew, and he was like, "Oh, do you see the old man?" And I was like, "No, what are you talking about?" And he's like, "Oh, dude, I have the same problem, and I see like an old man." And he started describing this guy like grabbing his neck and doing the same shit that happened to me, which wasn't in the movie. And I was like, "Oh shit!" And I was like, "Why did you say it like that? Like the old man, like everybody sees it." And he goes, "Oh, because the first time it happened, I called my dad." And I was like, "Oh, I had this crazy dream." And I started describing it. And his dad was like, "Oh, I see that guy too." And both of them had the exact same experience.
Unreal. It's crazy how many similarities there are with sleep paralysis once it gets to a certain level, with the paralysis and then the visions and the sightings of whether they're people or creatures, and there's so many common similar descriptions from people from the last however thousand or so years since it was recorded up until now, from every culture, from every society, and it's pretty amazing how closely related these stories are to other people,
Yeah, I mean how similar it is without there really being any similarities between the people themselves,
Yeah, especially pre-internet days too. How a lot of these things were whether they say the old man, a lot of common sightings were also of a woman, which what they call like the hag syndrome as well, which was almost like a real witchy kind of type of woman that would appear during paralysis. That everyone, I think it even originated the name from Sweden or Norway. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, it's like old Norse, and I think what you're referring to is the word mare.
Oh, like nightmare.
Yeah, we say mareritt, which in Norwegian means it actually means nightmare. But the mare, I believe, is an old name for witch or like female demon.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Like the person that I saw wasn't old though. It was like I don't know. It was like a girl in her probably late teens or early 20s. Like it wasn't. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it's
the actual
obviously
like visual aspect of it in and of itself. Like if I drew a picture of it, I don't think it would be like very scary looking. But it was definitely like you asked me before about this. Like, did I ever get the feeling that this like entity or whatever in my old house was benign, or like was it malicious? That like the sleep paralysis, I definitely felt like targeted, and it felt like very malicious.
It is. I mean, this is something I'm not going to say I'm well versed on, but I've been going through sleep paralysis frequently, and up until even currently, since I was the same age, 19 years old, and the frequency of it in the last 5 years has like changed everything for me, because I deal with this on every other day, if not every day, in my sleep, and it's we can talk for a very long time about that, maybe once we're done recording or another time,
Sure.
But our first episode that we did, that's what I touched heavily on was my sleep paralysis and the visions and things that came along with it, and graduating all the way into other realms of out of body experiences.
And also, we've talked to a good friend of ours from the UK
Yep.
about his experiences with sleep paralysis. And Ian, I almost recommend you not to listen to that because it's a fucking nightmare.
No, I mean, I want to hear about it. I mean, because it's,
Yeah, but
like the first time I had the visions, like I said, I always try to like rationalize shit, and in my head I was just like, oh, like, I'm going through this stress and the sleep paralysis coupled with that, and my mind is like a dream. Like my mind is just trying to like couple this stressful situation with like a visual element so I understand it, and like like dream interpretation or whatever. I don't know if you ever read it, like the gypsy dream interpretations. Like it's all just archetypes that already exist in your mind, and you're just using it to explain it to yourself. That's what I thought it was until I started hearing these other stories that were like the whole point of dream interpretation is that no two people are going to have the exact same archetype or experience, and for it to be something that's repeated with just really very few permutations in, I mean, millions of people, like you said, Pete, going back to like the beginning of recorded history, there's examples of this. That, I mean, it does kind of freak me out, but it also like, it makes me feel a little bit more comfortable with it.
Yeah, it's like a certain comfort to it as well. That I'm certainly not the only one going through this.
Right.
What's crazy to me too is how you said like hours have passed by during your paralysis. All the bouts I've had, I felt like hours have passed, and when I would wake from it, usually maybe 2 or 3 minutes had passed, and I felt like I was locked into these bouts that were going on forever, and I couldn't get out of it, and I couldn't escape it, and then by the time I'd force my way out of that scenario, boom, 2 minutes have passed, 30 seconds have passed. It's crazy to me. It must have seemed like years to you. I don't know if the time moved like that or not, but
yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it was like a thing that would repeat throughout the course of the night. Like I don't know if that's how yours is. Like I would wake up from it and then just immediately fall back into sleep, and it would just happen over and over and over again. Yeah.
Was it always the same like woman, like the same? Could you tell?
Exact same person every single time.
Oh, that's. I mean, that's a bit different from things I've experienced. But that's really, I'm not going to say it's cool. I don't know if it's cool or not. But it's different, and it's kind of intriguing, just the thought of, that you can could you like actually describe the features of the person? And obviously you knew what they were wearing and there were other people present, that's really different, really, really unique.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, it's not, I think since I moved from that house, I think I have had sleep paralysis 2 times. And this is in the course of, like I said, almost 3 years since I left there. And both times that I've had it, it has not been, I've not had any other hallucinations.
Right.
Like I haven't seen anything else. It's just like
paralysis.
Yeah. And it's the other thing that's weird is it used to happen when I was waking up. And the times that it's happened in the last couple of years, it happens as I'm falling asleep. Yeah. And I can kind of just shake myself out of it. And then I'm awake for another 45 minutes or an hour. But then I just, when I go back to sleep, I just go back to sleep.
Yeah, that's always the time for me. It's like right when I'm falling asleep, right before heavy like REM movement, boom. And my wife the same. She knows like when I'm about to be in that mode. And she wakes me. She can, my breathing changes. She can see the way my movement of my eyes are like fluttering. Because a lot of times I wake up screaming,
okay.
And not even out of fear, just out of trying to break myself out of the paralysis.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I always felt like I was screaming, like.
Oh yeah, and you're muffled.
yeah, and then I wake up and I'm not, but I've been like thrashing around, you know.
Right.
I'm surprised she's able to wake you up. I think my girlfriend had tried before, and it just, you know, I'm
I
just
mean,
in it till I'm not in it anymore.
there were times felt like I was screaming, and then when I was finally up, I was like upset, and I'm like, "Why did you not wake me? Didn't you hear me screaming? You know, like literally, legit mad.
Mm.
Like I didn't hear you. You know, you weren't screaming. You were. It was like almost like you were moaning with your mouth closed. And this was like all in the earlier stages before it got to like really the true insanity of it all.
Right, exactly.
But just basic paralysis. You know, it's a tough thing. You know, especially just trying to have normal sleep. But that's good that it stopped for you since you moved. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely like a thing that I think about, and like it's one of those things. Like, I mean, I guess like you guys have even said before, like I don't want to think about it because I feel like if I think about it, it might like trigger it again.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I mean, it's happened before. I had like a long conversation with my dad about it within the last year and a half, probably, and it didn't make it come back. You know, it's
Right.
just been hopefully subsided. You know.
Did your dad ever have experiences like that?
You know, when I asked him about it, because it was when this other guy, the bartender, had told me to, you know, he said he called his dad. He was like, "Yeah, you should call your parents. Like maybe they've dealt with the same thing." And that's why I called my dad and asked him, and he had no fucking clue what I was talking about.
Right.
I do. I mean, my dad was a soldier. He's had like super fucking intense dreams before. Like I've like heard him yell in his sleep, and like my mom has told me that like she's had to like get out of bed sometimes because he'll like punch and kick in his sleep, like he's fighting his way out of something. But he doesn't. It's not something that he talks about. And when I asked him point blank, which it seems like he would tell me, you know, but he
Right.
didn't know what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm definitely the only one of my family that I know of that's experienced that. I don't think it's definitely not something that's just passed down, which I don't know. It's just a tough thing. It was a tough thing for me to deal with on some levels.
No, I mean I can totally understand because it makes you not want to go to sleep,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
which is it causes all other kinds of problems with you when you're in that mindset of like actually being, even if it's not like a fear of going to sleep, it's like this weariness of like,
Yeah,
well, this I'm not even
disruptiveness.
resting, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But you, I mean, you're still having like the visions and everything when you have them?
Yeah. Yeah. Not. I think the height of it was probably like about 2.5, 3 years ago, where it was almost a daily thing. You know, I'm
Right.
not going to focus too much on it because if you actually want to listen to the first episode when we release it, you could hear a lot from it. But yeah, there were tons of like different experiences and visions and feel different types of presences. And in the last year, it's subsided a bit, where a lot of it is just the basic paralysis. It kind of hit like a peak and started climbing back down. But I've had, you know, it never truly stopped, never truly disappeared. You know, there's everything from voices to feeling people kind of like creeping next to me and whispering in my ear to other things that are even more graphic and
Yeah.
you
It's
know.
interesting that like, I mean, like the way you're describing it, like whispering in your ear and creeping by you and everything. It's that is very different from my experience because in my experience, it's not quiet or
Mm-hmm.
anything like. I mean, it's like it felt like very aggressive and overt.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
never been
all the
that for
loud.
me.
Yeah, the noises were all like really really loud, and it was
Were there
really
ever
like to the point. Sorry, what were you asking?
were there ever spoken words?
I do not recall
Yeah.
like ever having anything like directly said to me. Just they were like screams in my ears, you
Yeah,
know.
that's terrifying to me.
I mean, the
That's
screams
just
were one thing, and you know, the screams like when I found out that other people had like had the same sort of visions.
Mm-hmm.
And I started paying attention to that. The screams were one of the things that freaked me out the most because there were people that were able to recreate it 100% exactly like I heard it,
Wow.
which was one of the weirdest things to me because it seemed in my mind so specific
Mm-hmm.
and something that specific that other, like, not just, oh, sometimes I see people and they yell, like it was exactly what I heard,
Wow.
which definitely made things kind of weirder to me.
Yeah. Yeah, mine was always like an almost audible whispering. I could never make out the actual words, but
Right.
just right in my ear, like I could feel the breath, and
Gotcha.
which gave it a totally other different element, but enough to make me not want to sleep as well.
Yeah, I never had that. And I mean, the thing that was the weirdest was just the aspect of like, or the most concerning in the time that it was happening was just, like I said, like putting like the actual like laying of the hands, like I could feel hands on my shoulders and then
Right.
like the separation of my head from my neck. Like it was, like I said before, like I'm not a spiritual person. I don't think about things that way. But that was the first time I ever thought about myself as like myself, like the core of my being separated from my like physical representation of myself,
Mm-hmm.
like I inhabit a body and there may be something, you know what I mean? Like they're two
Right.
separate things and you might be able to remove them from one another, which was a really weird feeling anyway. And then this feeling of like, why is this fucking weird person like opening me up like they're trying to get inside of my body,
Mm-hmm. Was there ever
So,
like a choking or like short of breath feeling with you as well?
um,
Having Because that's like a
no.
common thing for paralysis. Even if you go back and you look at like those paintings from Fuseli, from I
Mhm.
think it was like the 16 or 1700s. There's two of them called the Nightmare, and both of them are very similar, with like a demon on the chest of a woman who's sleeping. Because they always went along with this like heavy choking sensation, short of breath, almost like being smothered.
Sure. Who did you say the artist was? I'm actually looking this up right now because I'm kind of curious about what that.
Henry Fuseli. You'll know one of these paintings.
Oh, yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't specifically remember being short of breath. But also I have asthma, which I've had most of my life, and it went untreated for a bunch of years. And I've oftentimes woke up like with an asthma attack or being kind of short of breath or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So there may be a correlation with that where maybe I don't notice it so much since that's
Right.
like kind of part of my daily life.
Mm-hmm.
But I went to go see a new pulmonologist just over a year ago, and he had his like questionnaire of like what are your symptoms and everything. And it was the first time I'd ever seen this. There was not an entire section, but there were like 3 questions about sleep paralysis. Just asking, do you suffer from sleep paralysis? Like, how long has it been going on, and how frequently do you suffer from sleep paralysis? Because he saw a correlation between, I guess, like asthma and sleep apnea, which I don't have,
Right.
or that I know of. But he had seen a correlation at least between the two things. So that's interesting you bring that up. It might be related on a physical level,
Mm-hmm. You had some great stories today, and thanks so much for
Thank you.
sharing with us. You're a good speaker as well, so it's nice to have someone on here that can carry basically the whole damn show. We don't have to say 2 words.
No,
Cool.
Ian, this was
Yeah, you're an interesting guy, man. It was really
this was
really
fa-
good stuff.
this was fantastic. Just to mention something there in regards to the paperwork at the doctors now mentioning sleep paralysis. I believe there's been work on sleep paralysis in the U.S. since the late 70s, and
Okay.
that had to do with Asian immigrants from the South Pacific, say, sorry, I mean Southeast Asia, there was a population of immigrants where they saw an increase in. I actually wrote it down during the time that you were speaking, Ian. It's
Mm-hmm.
called. Yeah, here it is. It's called sudden arrhythmic death syndrome, and it has to do with people dying in their sleep.
Okay.
And what's interesting in regards to that is that in these cultures in Southeast Asia, there is sleep paralysis, but there it's also linked up to the spirit world, and basically bodies getting possessed late at night. And I'm not saying that ghosts kill these people in their sleep, but it's interesting that if you live with beliefs strongly and do it for generations, and then you see an increase in deaths in a certain population that have moved to the U.S., that's very interesting to me.
Oh no, I completely agree with that. And I think there's a lot to be said for what your mind is able to do, like not even just with yourself, but how that can influence other people. The power of suggestion is a lot stronger than any of us are willing to admit, probably. And kind of getting these ideas in your head about like, well, maybe this thing is correlated with this other, this spiritual belief that I have. You can start to see a lot of connections in there, especially when it's something that you really have no way to explain away. And I mean, I don't know. There's so many other things. I mean, just even on a physical level that could impact the way that you sleep, or the way that your body will react in a certain situation. I mean, your DNA, one tiny little different strand of DNA that comes from somewhere down your family line can affect all these different things. So there's no telling what can influence all of it, I guess.
Yeah. Or these people from the Philippines brought evil spirits with them to the U.S. That's another explanation. We don't know.
Right. Well, I mean, I guess like what I'm thinking about, and I mean this might be too hippie new age, I guess, but like as you put it the other day, Klaus. But I mean, I think there's probably like a very scientific basis for it. Is like if you look at like human eyes or human ears or whatever, all of that came from years of genetic mutations from when we were like this tiny little fucking single-celled organism that, some protein bond that created the first little creature that was able to interpret light, that then changed because of genetic mutations over and over and over again. And like, what are these other genetic mutations that are allowing certain people or certain animals to perceive things that we don't know about yet? Before the eye was evolved, those little creatures didn't know that there was light or a sun or all these different things that were caused by light until we could finally interpret it. And now we've evolved to the point where we understand a lot more about the physical world around us because we can see it. But what are these other things that are happening in our DNA that are mutating, that are allowing us to perceive, anything else in the universe? It sounds fucking bizarre, but when you really think about how far we've come as evolved creatures, it's really not that bizarre,
Mm-hmm.
I might have lost you there. Sorry.
No, not at all.
No, not at all. I'm thinking about what you're saying.
I guess that's just the way that I try to, like I said, I always try to like rationalize things, and
Right.
science. It doesn't always make sense to me, but I trust the process of it, and I understand. I can have it explained to me in some way, and so maybe that's just my other way of trying to rationalize it, is trying to find like a concrete way of how these things interact with each other.
Mm-hmm. Definitely agree with that.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's most of the stories I got on that subject.
This was absolutely fantastic, Ian. The first story about the house and what happened there, and the car, and the suicide, and the doors. That was. I pictured it like a little movie almost, and that's the way you told the story too. It was absolutely fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Thank
right from
you.
the beginning until it's like nice graduation into till the end. It was really really good story. Ian Weiss, thanks so much for being with us today, talking with us on the Stockbury Dark. It was a pleasure and an honor to have you here, man. And
Cool. Thank you guys.
yeah,
All you people
well,
out there, support Foreign Legion Records and check out Fuerza Bruta. Did I say that correctly?
Yes. Yeah. Fuerza Bruta.
Yeah, great.
yeah,
Thank you
Cool.
so much.
Well, yeah. Thank you guys. I'll talk to you soon.
definitely. Take care, Ian.
Good
Bye.
night.